Now, a load of you may well remember 2 or 3 weeks ago, it's all a bit of a blur, to be honest with you. I took a little bit of time off, and the gentleman to my right or left, I'm not even sure how this camera works. He's over. Yes, I did it. He's over there. That's Michael Levy Jr. You know him because he stood in for me and he said, you know what, mate? I know you have a little bit of time off. I'm going to do a video. Very, very popular. He was a big hit with everybody. He's a good mate. He's a really good bloke. And what we're going to do is we're going to get him on the regular. We're going to try and do at least every 2 weeks, but we'll try and go for every week. He's a busy boy because he's a singer. And by the way, if you need a singer out in Tenerife, that's the guy. That's the guy you want to go to. By the way, go and check. What's your Facebook? By the way,
it's at Michael Levy Jr. _soul singer.
There you go. Give that a little whirl. He's not going to be a stranger to you, but he certainly won't be a stranger if you're on Hammers Chat Patreon because he does Overland and C Word with a couple of other naughty West Ham fans. So go and give that a whirl if you want to go and give the free trial a whirl. Anyway, mate, welcome. Thank you for joining us, mate. There's been a lot happening with West Ham, right?
It has, mate, and I'm delighted to be here doing this with you. And just a quick thank you to all your subscribers that were so very kind to me in the video when I stepped in. Big shoes to fill, you know. YouTube royalty is gonzo, but I must say, you put yourself out there. You never know how people are going to be, and I must say, 99.9% of the people were absolutely lovely and welcoming. And I think it's pertinent that we speak to each other like that as Hammers fans, because I always think, when I'm writing online, I won't say anything on a keyboard, behind a computer or on a phone. I wouldn't say to you if I wasn't sitting opposite you in a pub. And it's nice that we can have a difference of opinion and exchange of views whilst all respecting each other's differing opinions that make the world go round, especially the West Ham world. But yes, I guess you're going to want to talk about our Mohammed Kudus situation.
Well, it's funny you touched on it. Your video was excellent, mate. And I'm not just saying this. I'm saying this for the benefit of everyone else. I've already told you that privately, but it was brilliant. But what you say, funny enough, about talking with each other, I'd to be honest, I felt a little bit for ex-West Ham United employee yesterday because he really was the messenger. Which was obviously we were going to sell Mohammed Kudus, but I think he was very much the messenger of the bad news. And to be fair, X got a lot of exclusives in this one. It was him that got the Diouf exclusive. He was the first one that did it. So he's been really on the money of a lot of stuff. And I sort of watched it yesterday, sort of winced, from afar. And he got a lot of stick. He got a lot of stick. And I know it's difficult for him because he is behind a paywall and not everyone can read all the stuff and people just take snippets of what he's saying. But yeah, I mean, I think I'd probably speak on his behalf. Reading between the lines, he probably didn't want West Ham to sell Mohammed Kudus to Tottenham Hotspur for what's considered to be a low fee. I guess I want to ask you this to start off with. The justification from the club is that actually, if you look at Elanga, if you look at Mbeumo, actually, and you look at there were other examples given, I think, if you look at what Kudus did last season, it's actually about right in terms of the money. What do you think of that? And what was your reaction to yesterday?
Yeah, I think just on what you're saying about X, I think it is a case of shooting the messenger because people are frustrated and they're angry and they kind of see him and they see Sean as mouthpieces for the ball. But, Sean is happy to put out ball rhetoric. I'm not trying to, Sean's a lovely man. If you know him personally, he's a lovely man, but he's perfectly happy to put out certain messaging, do polls and stuff. X is a little different, equally as lovely a man as is Dave, but it's his job and it's his business to report the news as a middleman. So what he was doing was reporting the message that he had from the senior source. You're right, though. There is leak in it. It does sound like an excuse, and we're probably going to take heat for saying it. When you look at players like Elanga and Brian Mbeumo, that probably is a good barometer. And I think you hit the nail on the head there about Kudus's form last season. I think he devalued himself. I think he's done us no favours with his form. Yep. Okay, there are mitigating circumstances. I'd said to Gatesy and I had a friendly disagreement on Overland and C Word over on Patreon earlier in the year because I said I felt like we were going to play him on the left and then in the future he was going to move on to someone else and then we would realise just how much we'd wasted him. Whereas Gatesy was of the opinion that a player of his class should be able to turn up and play in any position. anywhere across the front three. And you've got to say perhaps he should, but I kind of feel like with the way he was used under Lopetegui and the way he's been used at the latter end of the season under Graham Potter, I don't think that did him any favours. But the worrying thing for me was his body language, Gonzo. He didn't look like a player. Okay, he does put in effort, but he also seemed a lot of the time like he was sulking, or maybe I've misinterpreted it. Maybe he was deflated because his shoulders were kind of dropped.
No, he'd always sit down after he scored a goal as well. Find a chair, have a rest. I mean, come on, mate.
Mate, he didn't get enough use out of that old carved elephant, did he? No use at all. When he pulled it out once, did he?
I did. I actually got that go. We should have done a bit of merch on Hammers Chat, but that's get your own carved elephant. Yeah.
Elephant cups before you wind down the club, the Hammers Chat store. Yeah, but also, he does have the potential to be world class, I think. And before we talk about what he'll going to do at Spurs, I did think over the last season and a half, not just last season, that he's a touch naive. He doesn't get his head up. The first thing you're taught as a junior, my son plays football, it's get your head up, to scan around, see the options. When you're dribbling's great, especially now being able to progress the ball up the pitch. You need to see what's around you. You need to see the options. And you need to release the ball at the right time. It was all or nothing with him. In the first season, it was take it around 5 people and put it in the corner, like he did, and the overhead kicks, or run into blind alleys. And I felt like he was doing that more than it was paying off for him, running into blind avenues and not getting his head up. Whether that was the old Paul Gascoigne syndrome, where when he wasn't playing so well, he always felt like he had to beat 3 players to make up for losing it the last time, or whether he didn't trust the teammates around him. But one thing's for sure, I think we didn't utilise him properly and we didn't get the most out of him. And as a result of that, his value has depreciated somewhat. But no excuse on the way Sullivan's handled it. I'm upset with that.
Yeah, I mean, it is, what can I say? I always thought Levy was gonna do what he did. And in fact, I've got to be honest with you, I was a little bit surprised today when I was corrected. Actually, no, he is going to pay it over 3 years. Okay, I just thought Levy would pay it over 5. So there's been some there, but the profit is not great because we still owe Ajax quite a lot of money for him as well. I do think there's something else. I think a lot of it, let me say this. I think a lot of it, for anyone that's spent any time on social media, particularly after Declan Rice went to Arsenal, and as I said yesterday, it felt like we got a fair amount of money for Rice at the time. I know now, no one knew he was going to start knocking in 2 double free kicks in the Champions League knockout and all that sort of stuff. We knew he was good, but 100 million was about the British record, 105 million. It felt fair at the time. But it's hard. It was hard watching him play against West Ham. And then it's hard on social media when the Arsenal fans start giving you stick, And I know, look, football's all about banter. It's not that. It just, you'd rather it sort of wasn't happening. So I think there's an element there of, oh my goodness, he's going to Tottenham because we've had a little taste of it with Arsenal. We know what's going to come this season from Tottenham. So I think we're wincing a little bit on it there. But there was something. So I almost want to separate the two. I don't think the problem is selling Kudus, because as you've just maintained there and pointed out, he struggled under Lopetegui and he struggled under Potter. It was how much we sold him for and who we sold him to. Now, there's been loads and loads of stuff been said. Because I think the club know that they've mucked up here. So there's been damage limitation. So firstly, you've got this thing of Kudus being made out to be the bad guy here. I don't know if he hasn't turned up for training or he put on a transfer request or anything like that. I would imagine you probably can't say that stuff if it's not true. But I don't know. What I would say is that the club can't harp on about loyalty because they were really trying to sell him in January. They really, really were. Lopetegui would have sold him. Graham Potter would have sold him, and the club were happy to do so. So the club were trying to sell him. So the problem is not selling him. The club were happy to do that. It's who he was sold to and how much it was for. But there was all these comments came out where the club are basically trying to mitigate what they've done. It's not they're backtracking, but they're trying to make excuses, right? One of the ones that were really interesting, by far the least sensational, almost hidden in amongst everything else, was something along the lines of Graham Potter thought that Jared Bowen was a better option on the right-hand side, which he is. I don't disagree with that. And didn't think that he was up to the standard to play centrally in the Premier League. And I thought that was telling, because there's no way that Potter hasn't signed off on this deal. And I think the one thing that wasn't mentioned was the left-hand side where he played. I thought that was really telling. They mentioned the right-hand side, which pretty much where he wasn't played all last season. Little bits and pieces, but not much generally. I mean, even Bowen wasn't played on the right-hand side all the time. The centre was mentioned, barely, hardly at all was he played in the centre. I mean, and we knew this. We know this to be true because actually, you look, even towards the end of the season, he played Alvarez at number 10, didn't he? Rather than even put Kudus in there. And the left-hand side wasn't mentioned at all. So it was almost admitted. So the one position that he played most last season has not even been factored into this, which is, so you can only read between the lines, because I think we've all probably come to the agreement, because I do think the left-hand side's a graveyard shift for West Ham anyway. No one seems to thrive or do well there. We can't play there anyway. So I couldn't help but think about that. And for all the fans' disappointment, I'm not entirely... Well, I don't think the board are disappointed. I mean, they're disappointed with the reaction, and I don't think Graham Potter's disappointed.
That point speaks more about our recruitment, our poor recruitment. Because what we've done is we've collected players, whether they fit, whether the pieces fit or not. Because we already had Jared Bowen on the right, and we knew that was predominantly Kudus' best position. We went out and spent a fortune on the young Brazilian Guilherme, who's also preferred position is on the right wing. So what we do is we go out willy-nilly, put bids in a scattergun approach, and whatever seems to be the best deal, it goes in. I mentioned on the video I did when I was stepping in for you covering, I was one of the lone voices saying we haven't won the transfer window. This doesn't work. The pieces didn't fit. When you looked at how Lopetegui had played previously abroad and at Wolves, the people we were bringing in didn't seem to, he needed someone who was pacey and powerful in the middle of the park, which we still need. Just at the time, I was worried about the disparity between the targets we were going after, which you've touched on many a time on videos that are archived for people to go back and see. To go from John Duran to Nicholas Füllkrug is two different styles of player entirely, and I just kind of felt like the players that we recruited didn't seem to gel. They weren't pieces for the puzzle. They were just pieces. And we sometimes do that. And Kudus has been that. We've not got the best out of him. Okay, he was better under Moyes. Yeah. But still, there was no long-term planning. Unless we expected to not tie Bowen down to that 7-year contract, the last one he signed. Unless we expected him to be a successor, or unless we expected him to be Paqueta's successor, but then that would have been more centrally.
Well, he was second choice.
Or second choice, but then he's, he
was second. We went after Doku.
Yes.
It was Doku we went after, who is very much a left-sided player.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there was a plan. Sorry to interrupt, mate. Go on, carry on.
No, and the situation we've got now is we've tried this director of football where there's one all-seeing person that sets a philosophy for the team, that recruits players for the team, that decides the style of play right from the under-9s all the way up to the senior team. We've dipped one foot in that. Sullivan never really relinquished his grip and let us actually do that. Now we're back to this higgledy-piggledy, whatever fits, whatever deal we can get done, whatever agents we know we can call, and the pieces don't fit. Now we're in a situation where, and this is a conversation for another day rather than Kudus really, but we're in a situation with the way that Graham Potter plays, we're having a problem getting Jared Bowen in his best position.
Yes.
So never mind left. So you're going out getting wing backs. We're now talking about Somerville looked all right at right wing back in the half against Aston Villa that he managed to have before he'd been injured for longer than Antonio, by the way. But where does this factor in? Where would we have played Kudus even if we kept him? The thing that upsets me is it hurts. Is Scott Parker all over again? It hurts that he's gone to them. It hurts seeing Declan Rice in an Arsenal strip. It's going to hurt even more seeing Kudus in the lily white, and it's hurt even more. I mean, I'm all over the place here, and I'll let you get a word in your own show.
No. People hear enough from me. Go on.
I think the other thing, and we've not rehearsed this, so this is just off the top of the head. I think the other thing...
Rehearsed?
Yeah, exactly.
The very notion. The very notion. You're not singing now, mate. Yeah.
No, we're going to get the harmonies right, aren't we, for the outro?
Yeah.
Look, I'll sing the West Ham news to you, but it'll be bad news. The other thing I think that hurts is he's going to go and flourish under Thomas Frank. He will be monopolised properly.
Yes.
I forget where I was going with it now because we were, having a laugh and a joke. But yeah, traditionally Millwall are really our rivals. We've not been in the same division for donkey's years to them. Historically, from the Docks and whatever, that's our proper rivals. Spurs have become a rival. I don't feel like it was as intense years ago when we grew up loving players like Lineker and Gascoigne and Hoddle. But it's become a bit different. The fans have become a bit different. They say they don't care about us, but you watch them rub this in our face when he turns up and puts a performance in. And that's what hurts, I think. And
the one thing I've noticed over the last 2 or 3 years, and it actually happened with selling Rice to Arsenal, is, and I don't know how it's happened, this almost like this disgust or a lack of acceptance that there might be a rivalry. And so you hear, they're trying to force a rivalry. Or when we would prefer to sell Declan Rice to Manchester City rather than Arsenal, the reaction then, why would they want it? It's almost like, and I don't know if it's just a modern thing and an internet thing. This is nothing sensational here. There's nothing new. There's nothing surprising. Of course we should want that. Of course we shouldn't want a player to go to Arsenal. Of course we didn't want Defoe to go to Tottenham or Parker or Carrick or anyone else to end up there. We don't want these players to go to Tottenham, right? It's as simple as that. Let me tell you about rivalry though. So I went to school in Newbury Park, right? And no, it wasn't there. It was it was secondary school. It was when we were in Gantsill. So I went to Valentine's School in Gantsill. And sorry,
lovely park.
Yeah. Well, Essex used to play cricket there, funny enough, but we used to sneak in. So our PE teacher was a Tottenham fan. Like you have day trips, you have school trips, right? He took us, and we're in West Ham territory, right? He took us to White Hart Lane for our day out. Load of West Ham fans. Yeah. And in our class, one Tottenham fan, one Arsenal fan. He took us to White Hart Lane. That was it. We had only ever had 2 day trips when we were at school. One of them was to White Hart Lane. The other one was St Paul's Cathedral. It took us to White Hart Lane.
Mr. Combs was that Mr. Dilly?
I was very, very, very resentful of that actually. Okay. But so I always I didn't But they're a rival. It's as simple as that. What do you how are you feeling about stuff? And I mean, in regard to the club and that money being reinvested. I mean, we're going to do a regular video on this, mate. But so we got a lot of time to get adjusted to this. Does it seem all doom and gloom? It does to me. It doesn't seem great at the moment, to be honest.
Look, I mean, I'll just say this without touching on sensitive subjects. I've no affiliation to the club. I'm no mouthpiece. I'm doing no one's business or bidding. Yeah, I'm worried about it because we never quite get it right, Gonzo. We never quite get it right, and I'm not sure that Graham Potter is this all-seeing, old school Alex Ferguson style manager. He's always look at his CV. He's always been a head coach that has the players bought for him. So I'm not sure about him. Carl McCauley, I'm sure he's a brilliant data analyst. I'm sure he's absolutely fantastic at identifying players. In terms of negotiating and getting them across the line, I don't think that's his forte. I certainly don't want to look at Sullivan to do that. I certainly don't want to look at
Sullivan doing it, yeah.
But that's what it will be, along with take it or leave it Brady. So no, I'm not hopeful for it. I don't think our stock's very high. I don't think, look, if my son's only 10 but plays football at a good level. If he was 15, 16, 17, 18, even as a West Ham fan, diehard West Ham fan, like claret and blue, born in Forest Gate, grew up in Canning Town, I don't think I'd be advising my son to sign for West Ham. I really don't at the moment. It just seems like a what's the word without swearing on YouTube, a miss show. I kind of feel I kind of feel worried about it. But I did want to get this in because I'm mindful of how long we've been going. Again, I'm no bald mouthpiece. They're kind of between a rock and a hard place a little bit, though, aren't they? Because Gio said this morning in his video that maybe we could have held out a little bit longer into the window. And I agree with him, to see if the likes of Chelsea come in, to see if Arsenal come in, to see if anyone overseas comes in. But by the same token, we're all screaming at them, sign players. So you either take the gamble and you hold on to him later on, which gives you less time to go and replace him, or you pull the trigger and you take that money and you reinvest it, which should help us get Diouf over the line, you know, and maybe a goalkeeper, maybe a centre mid. The thing that hurts is it's Spurs. The thing that hurts is Levy has done us. He's outright lowballed us and done us. And you know, and it was interesting, the timing of this. He's asked for a transfer. He's put a transfer request bit in. That may be the case, and they may not be allowed to say that, but that could have been a month ago. It's interesting that just as it's about to come out how little we accepted, then it's besmirched the player's reputation.
Yeah, look, well, what can you say? It just doesn't cut any water with me, because I know they were trying to sell him in January. That was them. They were saying they basically wanted to get rid of him. He is for sale. The only reason that he didn't go was because Fulkrug got injured, because Antonio got injured, then Bowen got injured. That was it. That around that time we would have been selling him. So no, I don't. What I'm saying is, it doesn't matter if you put in a transfer request or not. They have no rightful claim to demand loyalty, because they were going to get rid of him. But I also don't think. I don't think also he's a victim or anything like that. You know, it's just, in terms of, it was quite funny actually, in terms of the timing of it, because I had just recorded. I didn't publish it. I recorded a video. So talk about the time I'll never get back. I recorded a video because Noni Madueke was about to. Apparently they'd agreed a deal, Arsenal and Chelsea, and it was because they got Gittins and because they got João Pedro. If they'd have sold another winger, which obviously Madueke is, then they might have come in for Kudus. So I'd just done it. I'd just done the video basically saying, well, this is it. Now, I remember saying the words, now Sullivan might get the mini bidding war that he was after. And I didn't process it, because at the time I was literally typing up the description, doing the thumbnail, and then I sort of refresh it. What? Hold on. Then all the stuff came out about Kudus going to Tottenham. So, well, there's no point doing the video now, because it would just look ridiculous, because everyone will say, well, I think you'll find he's not going to Chelsea. A deal's been agreed with Tottenham. Yes, it's the timing. If we had just held out for another 2 or 3 days, would that have changed? I don't know.
Yeah, we're not privy to what goes on, but what we needed was that Man City effect in the Rice negotiations. Yeah, that's what we needed, you know. But... Yeah.
It's disappointing. It's disappointing, but there's so much pressure. It's tough here, because I was never behind the appointment of Potter. I wasn't. I didn't mind getting rid of the director of football, as long as you were going to bring in another one. It was to getting rid of the position of director of football. So I don't like, I can't change my tune now. It'd be disingenuous of me to do so. I think we went cheap. I think we always go cheap on managers. Yeah. And the difficulty for me now is I'm still waiting for some evidence that do you know what you could actually say about anyone, be it board or management or anyone? I'm still waiting for evidence that anyone can do their job, right?
Yeah.
The irony is, the one person I knew that he could do his job was probably Tim Steichen. He looked like he could have a fight in an empty telephone box, unfortunately. I wonder. I'm not happy with the position that I think we're in now, where we got a coach that I'm not completely confident about, who we desperately need him to work now. This has to work. Potter has to. This has to work out. Whatever his plan is, whatever him and McCauley discussed, I don't doubt that this was a discussion for years, or one day we'll get a club and we would be able to do this, and then we can mould it in terms of recruitment exactly how we want it. Whatever their vision is, it has to work. Next season, his tactics have to work. He has to get the players. And I would also agree, by the way, that Kudus probably doesn't suit his tactics. I would agree with that, right? So, as I say, it's not the selling of Kudus particularly. And I do think actually he'll do quite well under Thomas Frank. But all I hope is that we are now able to get those players in that we so desperately need. We just need. I can't think of a time we've been so desperate for a manager to work out. We really, really need this now. People will be coming up with examples. There'll be lots of good ones that are probably better than this one now, but it's tough because, and for me, it just seems like we're in the unknown. We don't know if Sullivan can close the deals. We don't know how much money we've got. We don't know if Potter's tactics, looking at last season, are going to work. We don't know if McCauley can identify the targets. We don't know if he can get a deal over the line. We don't know if the teams, well, we all assume that Man United and Tottenham are not be as bad as last season. Where are we going to be? There's an uncertainty. It looks like we might be down in the bottom 5 or 6 places in the Premier League. There's all this uncertainty now, and I think that's we need some positivity now. We could, and I don't mean this to be in any disrespect to old Magic Diouf. I hope he turns out to be a brilliant player, but we need now a player, a bit of a, don't even have to be a superstar, but a bit of a statement signing of somebody that we know is going to go straight into that first team.
Impact.
And whatever position it is, right? You're going, this is my position, whatever. Ward-Prowse isn't playing because we've bought this player, right?
Yeah.
And who can come in and he can hit the ground running, and so as we can get a little bit of faith. I've got no problem signing the 20-year-olds and the rest of it, by all means, do that. But someone, I don't, maybe it's this, whoever it might be, whoever this player is, to come in, hit the ground running, and then, because we need a little bit of belief, mate. We need a little bit of belief.
Yeah, we need a rousing Chiaki style athlete in there. We need a Fofana style bit of physicality in the midfield, an athlete. The bigger problem than that, Chris, is in a year's time when both parties are able to exercise the break clause that they've got with Potter. Potter will be out, McCauley will be out, Baby will be out with a bathwater. We'll have a load of players that potentially don't suit the next manager we get who's on a free in the bargain bin, in the petrol station bargain bin of managers, and it will be all over again. And I do a general football podcast with a friend of mine, and we recently spoke about Man United when Amorim came in, and I was of the point of view that Man United are, and I realise we're a West Ham channel here, but Man United are a mess from the top to the bottom, and poison drips from the top. So it doesn't matter really. I'm not trying to be pessimistic or negative for anyone watching, and we'll try to find some positivity, and my fingers are crossed. But I think when the system is broken, it doesn't really matter who you sign, doesn't really matter who you get in, because when the leadership is wrong, when the structure is wrong, when the pieces don't fit, you've got a recipe for disaster. And that's why I'm feeling like you about the upcoming season. It needs to work. We really need to see a change, and Potter needs to surprise you and me and all of us. It really needs to click. Because I was a little bit, what is it Gio says about you and Lopetegui? You were catfished a little bit by the way you came across.
Yes, after we appointed him, yeah.
Yeah, so I felt very similar to you about the appointment of Potter. I didn't fancy it. I did an interview when I took the kids to the football. We went to the Wolves game just before the thing, and Dan Lawless asked me on West Ham Fan TV what I thought about Potter, and I said, I really agree with Sullivan, but I thought that the Brighton model, because the infrastructure was there, he had everything there, I thought it flattered him, and I didn't fancy him. Now, strangely, we've brought him over. He doesn't have that infrastructure. He's not exercising the role as a head coach. He's now this all-seeing old-school manager doing everything, and the pieces don't fit. So, yeah,
ironically, what Moyes really wanted.
But he was refused that in the contract to sign another one. Where he should, and I thought Moyes should have gone towards the end anyway. But it's hickledy-pickledy, and this is takes me back to the point, compounds the point. Poison drips for the top, and I know this is old hat, and until there's a change of ownership, I don't really have much faith in a lot changing. But I feel like I'm being, overly negative. But it's my genuine footballing opinion.
Well, I also, I know you, and you're not a negative person, so no. I don't, you don't phone me up moaning and stuff like that. So that's you're not that way. In fact, you're positive. You're a positive bloke. So, I'll leave you with this though. This is my final worry. So I overread stuff into everything, and it's the big comments that grab your attention. He didn't turn up he was late for training. He put in a transfer request. So there's stuff like that, which obviously grabbed the attention, but it's stuff. So like I said earlier, the fact that Kudus didn't work out on the right, and he didn't feel able to play through the middle and the left wasn't mentioned, I thought that was quite telling. And it led me to believe, because we can't rely on Paqueta, it led me to believe we probably are going to have to buy somebody creative. You're right. We are going to need an athlete, but I think we're going to need someone really creative that can thread a pass.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite telling as well. But there was something else that was said from the club, which is we hope it's been paid over 3 years, so 54.5 million paid over 36 months. Let's just hope it's spent wisely.
Yeah.
That's the comment.
Yeah, let's not hope. Let's get our ducks in a row.
I don't want to hear.
No.
I don't want to hear that. I want to, by all means, say it. By all means, you know, and I can't complain if you're going to go and seek clarification on the length of terms that it's paid over. Of course, yeah, you know. But I don't that bit. But I don't want to hear. We hope. That's that. Nobody wants to hear that. If you're a manager at work and if you're running a building site, do you think I'll get all those pipes laid today? Or I hope that I can. What? Do you think? Yeah. You don't think that consumer unit's going to catch on fire? Do you? Has it been wired up properly? Well, I hope it's not going to catch on fire. You don't want to hear that stuff, right? Want to hear we've got. I understand the club are not going to tell us any targets, and rightly so. We got good targets. The manager and Macaulay have got a real clear plan of what they want to do, and we're going to make sure that we invest this money in the right players. Not we hope it's invested wisely, which no, yeah. I don't like that. I don't 100%. Like that at all.
And it's a conversation for another day. But what about this 40 million Barclays loan that needs to be paid back by the 15th?
Well, that's every year. It's not even news. We do that every year. So there's nothing. We've been doing it for a long, long time. So it is just every year we basically pay off the overdraft, then we get a new overdraft. So we're always a year behind. Is it ideal? No, but it is sort of what we do. That's not my main. What I hate is to see. I don't think there should be any loopholes for PSR and all the rest of it, because I don't think it should even exist. No. Right? I would defend anyone's right to go and be ambitious with a football club. I think it's killed ambition, all this stuff, right? So, but bearing in mind you have to have loopholes, jump through them. We didn't do it, and things like Aston Villa, they clearly didn't want to sell Jacob Ramsey at the price that whatever it was. So in the end, you know what, we'll just sell we'll sell the ladies' team to the holding company. We'll value it at 55 million, which is exactly what they needed. We got 3 billionaires on the board.
There's options for us.
Well, there are, and if you could argue, because of the BBC documentary, our ladies' team has a higher profile than Aston Villa's. You could probably make a case that actually, and that would have blown PSR. I wouldn't even have to worry about it. And we could have spent 90 million without doing that. If they really, really wanted to, I think you could make a case that the West Ham board could have injected fairly and without breaking any rules, 150 to 200 million, and really, really backed the manager. But then that is more than any overdraft that bothers me, to be honest with you. And I think it's just. But as I said all along, there's a lack of desire. There is an absolute lack of desire. And honestly, watching that unfold once I knew Levy was involved, it honestly it was like watching a little teddy bear going into a fight with a pack of wolves. It was, there was only ever going to be one winner there. He's such a wily operator, Levy, and he got exactly the deal he wanted. And I think that is that. And then the thought of seeing him in the Tottenham shirt is not great. Anyway, mate.
Just last thing, Chris, on Kudus. Loyalty and respect are two-way. And like you pointed out, we've been shopping him around for months and months and months. Would everybody be so annoyed if Mohammed Kudus had signed for 54.5 million or whatever it was, paid over 3 years on a 6 year, if it had gone to Brighton, who he was supposed to go to before us, if they'd have put the release clause in? Or is it because it's Spurs that hurts? Or is it just because the way we handle things? What is it that hurts the most?
Well, to be fair, the anger was there before anyone released any excuse on it. To be fair, it's the big problem is, I think the big problem is Tottenham, and I think for me as well, I think when people see a release clause, you think you are protected to that amount. So it's only a year ago, if you remember, it was we just got through that release clause. Anyone could have come and bought him for 85 million after his first season. We were probably a bit surprised that nobody did.
And talking about let's get him re-signed up, even if we can increase that to 100 million.
Yes.
Do you remember?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Indeed. So I think the fact that we had protection there. We had some insulation from whatever Levy wanted to do. And as I say, there was a real desire to keep him. And I understand, maybe we weren't going to fit in the team, but whatever it might have been, if there was a real desire not to sell to him and a real desire to put money into the club, we could have done so. We didn't have to sell him to Tottenham, and we could have really used that to our own advantage, because I'm talking about the release clause, because the thing is, Levy's got a duty of care to Thomas Frank, who they've gone out and got. And Thomas Frank, I don't disbelieve this. I think this makes sense. Thomas Frank had apparently identified Kudus as his number one target, right? Levy's got to back him. They've just gone. I know better than anyone. I found it awkward watching Ange Postecoglou last season, because it's just like a man that was completely unhappy. In the end, he kept him up, and he got him into the Champions League. And he's had this thing. My second season, I always win a trophy. Fair enough. Honestly, you're going to talk the talk, you've got to walk the walk, and he did. All right. So when you do that, when you're going to go, and that's the first trophy in a long time, you better back the manager that's coming in. So I do think that there would have been some pressure from Thomas Frank as well, probably to Levy. Come on, can we push this through? You've recruited me, you paid for me. They got big money next season because they're in the Champions League. They would have got a decent whack. They would have got an extra 30-40 million pound on winning that Europa League last season, on top of all their hospitality, on top of their money. Tottenham can afford it. Tottenham can afford it. And, it's, I think we surrendered our own strength in negotiating position, which we had because of the buyout clause. And I think just overall, we did a really bad job, a really, really bad job of it. And when it's sort of that's the feedback coming about what else you could do. Well, any of the 2 or 3 things that I suggested, would have been doable. But there you go.
Can't we get Antonio to drive him to White Hart Lane?
I could have stopped that there.